Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Live Show. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to get ready for those playoff semifinals. Hopefully, you guys didn't even have to sweat last week because you were cool enough to have a bye. But if not, we will continue to, again, watch the film, get better, and get those lineups right. But I cannot accomplish this alone, and accordingly, joining me is the one, the only Dwain, the Rock McFarland. Dwain, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Happy Monday night doubleheader next day. Survived, Ian, in the Guillotine League over at Fantasy Life. We are down now to Friedman, Thor, and myself. I squeaked it out against Waz. Waz had Mike Evans and Amon-Ra St. Brown this weekend. Went completely off. Like, Waz got a donut also from Cooper Kupp. So I thought I had him, thought I was safe. And man, after Sunday afternoon, I was like, oh man, I'm going to lose. He had Brock Bowers and Bijan Robinson left last night. All I had was a 3-point lead, but I did have Mr. Justin Jefferson, who I know you're about to dive into. I wish you would have made it more comfortable and did some of the other things you're about to talk about that we missed out on, but a win is a win is a win. We are on to the final three, and my sole purpose in life is to take down that loudmouth Thor of our own staff out here. Just, he's been talking about you and I on, I guess, shows all year. So, Thor, wow. I'm coming for you, man.
Wow, you guys heard it here. A little, inner Fantasy Life rivalry going on. That's how you know the fantasy football season is alive and well. So getting to that Monday night doubleheader, guys, we're going to start off with the Vikings taking down the Bears 30-12. And yeah, it wasn't exactly, the most perfect performance on either side. Did have Sam Darnold and company, though, do enough to get the comfortable win. So 231 and a touchdown through the air for Darnold. One interception, but it was on a 4th and 3 where he didn't really have much of a choice but to just throw it up. And the reason he didn't have much of a choice was because, as Dwain mentioned, Jefferson couldn't quite make it a bit more comfortable. Yes, he had 7 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown, guys, but he dropped what sure looked like was going to be a 30-yard score and also got tackled at the 1-yard line on another. So Aaron Jones wound up punching in that touchdown. Nice day at the office. Cam Akers punched in a touchdown. Jordan Addison, 7 catches, 63 yards. Another solid enough performance there. But Dwain, I guess the more disappointing one was the really lack of, involvement for TJ Hawkinson, someone who coming into the season we could have seen as being the number 2 target here, but as it stands entering week 16, sure, it looks a lot like the clear-cut number 3.
Yeah, he's a low-end tight end 1 right now in fantasy. But, if you want some encouraging news, 3 out of the last 4 games, he's been over 80% route participation. So he's on the field. It's just not the same version of TJ Hawkinson quite yet that we had from last year. Still obviously recovering from the injury and taking some big hits out there. High lows. I'm thinking, man, this guy is taking some monster shots coming off the injury. He's been back for quite a bit now, so he's probably feeling as close to he probably feels close to normal, just not quite performing up to probably, what we expect from TJ Hawkinson at this point. But it's the ascension of Jordan Addison, right? We've talked about him multiple times, so no need to go back there, but he continues to earn his targets and really be the number 2 to your point. But again, with TJ Hawkinson, main thing is the playing time is there, and we know how these things go, Ian. We know that suddenly if the defense shifts to one of these other guys or they decide, hey, we're just going to really focus on taking away Addison, that's going to open things up for Hawkinson. So I still would not rule out, at some point we get a 3 or 4 week stretch where Hawkinson just goes crazy because he's in a good offense. We like Sam Darnold and he's getting the playing time. So that's the big thing. These weeks where he's had Josh Oliver back, he is getting the playing time. So he is a low end tight end 1, but he does carry upside because we like the offense.
Vikings taking on the Seahawks next week. And if things go right here over these next few weeks, could have a battle for that NFC North crown in week 18. Vikings, Lions, get your popcorn ready for that one. Meanwhile, with the Bears, really disappointing performance, I believe, from Caleb Williams. Saw him have a much more success against this very same defense a few weeks back. But Dwain, man, just seems like the same mistakes popping up, man. Holding the ball a bit too long. And even on the rare occasions where he gets a clean pocket, just not seeing the field the way we know he can, having some inaccurate passes thrown in there. Just not, again, the sort of lofty rookie season we were hoping for. We've seen worse. I get it. Not saying the dude's going to be an all-time bust or anything like that. But, man, he had a 0.1 yard average target depth at halftime, man. It's just not the offense that I think any Bears fans were hoping to see. So, Thomas Brown, can we officially call the man a fraud, Dwain? What are we doing? Multiple 4th and 1 runs up the middle to DeAndre Swift. Seeing the first one get stuff wasn't enough for you. And then, my God, It wasn't Shane Waldron's idea to put Doug Kramer in there. What is this dude doing in practice to get your backup center on the field to first almost throw away the Commanders game and then next, Dwain, nullify a DeAndre Swift touchdown because all you had to do was go talk to the referee and say, hey, I'm an eligible receiver on this play. And this wasn't a Dan Skipper situation where it looked like he said it. They showed the entire process of him lining up, and he didn't even look in the ref's direction. So just, again, complete malpractice from the Bears, Dwain. But hey, at least Keenan Allen's doing good things lately.
Yeah, sometimes you hear the saying at the end of a game, it's like, oh, the team just wants to get on the bus. They just want to run the ball, even though they're way down, and they want to get on the bus and, just get home. It feels like that's what's happening in the whole part of this late part of the season for the Bears. It's like they just want to get on the bus, go home for next year. On Caleb, I will say, completely perplexing. Like the quick reads that are there when he's not pressured, when he is pressured, and he just passes them over. And the film is littered with this stuff. Caleb will still make the crazy big play. So those things are going to be there. But, man, he's just got to figure out how to do those little consistent things in between the big plays that help keep the offense on schedule. You did mention Keenan Allen. He is the guy, though, that has been benefiting, especially in a lot of this trash time, Ian. If you look at it now, 3 out of the last 4 games, Keenan Allen over 20 fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. He's got a 9.0 utilization score. Guys, that's wide receiver 1 territory. So really, Keenan, we can go all the way back to after the bye week. We know he got hurt in the preseason, got re-injured that in week 1, missed a little bit of time, wasn't quite healthy until after the bye. He's been the Bears wide receiver 1 since then. They are trying to get DJ Moore involved, and that's where a lot of those low ADOT throws come from that you're talking about. I actually think, to their credit, they're just trying to give Caleb some easy throws to maybe get him on schedule, but it doesn't matter. In between, he's still not doing the other parts. But the big takeaway, is just that Keenan Allen, he does appear to be the most trusted wide receiver of Caleb Williams for whatever that's worth. And that's been 20 plus points in 3 out of the last 4 weeks.
Honestly, could have had an even bigger game out there. Had the 82 yards and a touchdown, but was overthrown on what sure looked to be possibly a 32-yard touchdown. So they get the Lions next week, which would have been a tougher matchup, maybe a month or 2 ago. But now they're basically just playing the Lions.
Multiple drops
defense, so
by Keenan, too.
Yeah. Multiple drops.
I would say,
as well.
I didn't count, but I'm guessing like 3 probably at least.
I think there were at least 2 official ones. Also had an inopportune drop from Mr. Roma. Dunze could have had a 16-yard touchdown, but also got missed earlier in the game himself on an 11-yard touchdown. And then on the next play, Dwain seemed like he was open, but Keenan accidentally jumped in front of him and dropped the ball on, again, what looked like was going to be a touchdown for Rome. So all sorts of sheeshy moments going on. I did like some of the RB usage for DJ Moore early on, but then it seemed like they never actually got back to using him as a wide receiver. So just awesome stuff going on for the Bears. But I will close with one nice thing about the Bears. Caleb Williams is one tough SOB, Dwain. The fact that this dude, I do not believe, has missed a single snap because of injury this year. Yes, I am knocking on wood. Just impressive, man, because he has been taking so many big hits week after week. And you know what? I think a lesser, a less tough quarterback would have, pulled himself out a long time ago. So hopefully it gets better, Bears fans. Can't get much worse. Let's move on to the other Monday Night Football matchup. The Falcons took down the Raiders 15-9. Kirk Cousins with a bounce back performance. He threw for 112 yards, Dwain. League high 18 turnovers. Darnell Mooney, goose egg after Cooper Kupp started the week with one, doing his best impression there. Drake London did catch an early touchdown, but only had 3 total targets on the game. Honestly, man, the only highlight that we've really consistently seen in Atlanta this year is Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, for sure. And really, the Falcons, they do not trust Kirk Cousins at this point either. We've seen them get forced to have to throw the ball some, over the last 4 games. The yards were there, but the touchdowns obviously weren't. So they're really leaning into this ground game, Ian. And if you look over in the utilization suite of tools, you go over to team styles and you can actually see drop back rate over expected. It's listed as DBOE. And over these last 3 games, minus 19%, minus 8%, and minus 9%. And all that number is doing, it's comparing what the Falcons are doing at a play level based on the score as well as the down and distance versus the league average over the last 4 seasons. So that's just telling you, relative to the league, the Falcons are running the ball way more often than other teams. And I think a lot of it comes back to the struggles you've been talking about with Kirk Cousins. Just doesn't look very mobile, doesn't have very much strength on his throws, still anticipates and does some things. I mean, he still has the knowledge upstairs of what he needs to do, but the physical traits are just not there right now to help him execute. And so whenever the team can, I think they really are trying to protect him with the run game.
Kirk Cousins can't move, so the off-script, scenarios are pretty much dead. He's got 18 turnovers, so it's not like he's making great decisions out there. And the lack of arm strength really, just prevents them from really testing defenses downfield. But otherwise, he's got some good stuff going on, Dwain. So that really was it for the Falcons. Did want to give a shout out, though, to Kadero Hodge. Not one, but 2 block punts in the same game. Dwain, I've been a Kadero Hodge guy for a long time, developed by the Cleveland Browns. Great to see, again, some great plays there on special team. Probably just bought himself an extra, 3 or 4 years in the league just as a special teamer. So quickly going to finish things out with the Raiders, who now currently hold the number 1 pick in the 2025 NFL draft, taking for Shador or whoever else you might want. Good job by them, I guess. But yeah, turns out Desmond Ridder still very much not a good football quarterback. First completion to a wide receiver, Dwain, came with 5:22 left in the fourth quarter. So luckily, kind of started feeding Jacoby Myers, didn't completely kill you, ended up having 5 catches, 59 yards. But when I say that stat, you would think that Brock Bowers must have had a huge game, but sadly, no, just 3 catches for 35 yards. I'm sure nobody wanted to see that there in the fantasy playoffs. So hopefully Aiden O'Connell, someone who was the emergency quarterback here, is going to be back for week 16 and beyond, because again, floor is really that much lower when Ridder is under center. But big news in Fantasyland, Dwain, I guess moving forward would be the backfield, because unfortunately, Sincere McCormick was ruled out with an ankle injury.
Yeah, and it's hard to know for sure what they will do if McCormick misses time, but we do know Zamir White's out of the picture, so we don't have to worry about him. Dylan Lobby apparently doesn't exist, so I don't think we have to worry about him. So it will be down to Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah. We saw Amir Abdullah come in and handle more of a full-time role earlier this season. Last night, he was the lead guy after we lost McCormick, but it was due probably to the trailing game script, because he is the guy they like to use out there on the passing downs. Obviously, he came through for you with 19.6 fantasy points. So I don't know where you sit on this, but I'm guessing Alexander Madison will probably be the early down back. Amir Abdullah would take over, those passing down duties, probably some sort of a gross split that we really don't want to deal with in fantasy, especially in a massive playoff game and an offense we don't trust. If Brock Bowers is basically busted in 3 out of the last 4 games, do you really want to roll out here with Alexander Madison or Amir Abdullah? I get it. If you're in a skank league, you get a pass on this. Maybe you got to use one of these guys, but you really don't want to.
Jaguars, Saints these next 2 weeks for the Raiders, so it's just reasonable enough matchups to maybe get Madison the top 35 or something. Right, exactly, but not going to feel too good about it. So that was the Raiders, and yeah, only final note, I did find it funny, Dwayne, that when Madison lost a fumble, the broadcast announced it as Sincere McCormick, and then never realized it and corrected it. So yeah, Sincere McCormick, hold on to the football, man. So that was our Monday Night Football breakdowns. There was a bunch of other news in the NFL, though, that I wanted to quickly run through before we get into some sheesh and utilization goodness ahead of week 16. So Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes diagnosed with a mild high ankle sprain. He'll be fine long-term per rap sheet, but yeah, with the quick turnaround to a Saturday game, considered week to week, and I would say unlikely here for at least this one. Also, though, in better news, Seahawks head coach Mike McDonald, hopeful Geno Smith will practice this week with the knee injury, seems to have avoided serious, long-term issues there. Meanwhile, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski and Titans head coach Brian Callahan have not named starting QBs. Obviously, in Cleveland, we would vastly prefer Jameis over the DTR experience for all the pass catchers involved. In Tennessee, at this point, I think we could say Mason Rudolph better than Will Levis as well. Over at running back, really bad news. Lions RB David Montgomery going to miss the rest of the season with a torn MCL. All the apologies in the world to anyone who bet his rushing yard over. It was at 775.5, and he finished with 775. Sheesh. Saints running back Alvin Kamara dealing with a groin abductor type of situation, getting more tests. But yeah, it doesn't sound promising. And accordingly, Kendre Miller going to be near the top of all the waiver wire articles you read this week. More on him in just a little bit. Nick Chubb out for the season with a broken foot. Probably won't require surgery, though, which is nice. And then Jaleel McLaughlin dealing with a quad injury ahead of Thursday night. Over at wide receiver, Jalen Waddle not dealing with a serious injury with that ankle issue considered day-to-day. Not major, but is in question for this week. Meanwhile, Xavier Legette with the groin issue, likely to miss week 16 and considered week to week. And the Ravens have excused Deontay Johnson from practice. Not a suspension, just a mutually agreed not going to practice. Just very normal stuff going on in the world of Deontay Johnson. season. Also note Will Dissly not practicing this week. Maybe another week of the Stone Smart experience. 49ers suspended Devondre Campbell for refusing to play for 3 games. Bengals lost defensive end / star tight end Sam Hubbard for the season with a PCO issue. Cowboys lost cornerback Trayvon Diggs for the season with a knee issue. Mike Tomlin is optimistic TJ Watt could be back Saturday versus the Ravens. The Lions defense, oh my gosh, is a walking graveyard. They lost their stud starting D tackle, Alem McNeil, their starting cornerback, Carlton Davis, and another cornerback, Khalil Dorsey, 2 season-ending injuries. Maybe Carlton can return in like the NFC Championship, but going to be a while. And finally, to end things on a slightly good note, Pat Surtain of the Broncos only dealing with a minor ankle sprain, so nothing serious. Hopefully he will be out there Thursday night. So that was the news, everybody. And now a quick word to our friends over at Game Time. Dwain, we both know there's nothing like being at a game in person, especially around the holidays. Now, hand up, I am a fan of football over basketball, but when you get 82 games a year and some of these good vibes from the play-in tournament and stuff that they are experimenting with more and more often, I can appreciate, trying to throw a ball through the hoop from time to time as well. And accordingly, Game Time is my go-to for finding amazing tickets, but not just for sports, also for concerts and shows too. I know the McFarland family, big fans of Hamilton, so if you want to keep going to some of those plays, Dwayne, maybe you should be checking out Game Time. I was scrolling through the Game Time app the other day and I came across my favorite feature called Game Time Picks, and it is a total game changer. Game Time Picks curates your experience, showing you the best deals on great seats, and Game Time makes it so easy. It is truly a no-brainer, people. Seriously, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you can check it out for yourself by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, using code LIFE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LIFE, LIFE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. It is Tuesday, Dwayne, which means it is time to put a bow on the previous week with the Sheesh Report presented by our friends over at Mike's Hard Lemonade. All the sorts of tilting, near miss, beyond the box score moments that simply left fantasy managers saying sheesh. And accordingly, we're going to start off with unrealized air yards, just a good way of tracking how much opportunity was left on the field for pass catchers on their incomplete targets. So had 11 players rack up at least 75. Shout out YouTube fam. You can see the full list for yourself right now. But really, Dwayne, the big 4 here that were over 100, Terry McLaurin with 121, Justin Jefferson with 117, Cortland Sutton with 101, and Jawan Jennings with 100. So did want to shout out Scary Terry, because, man, as great as that 2-touchdown performance was, literally, man, probably should have had an additional 2 scores, had not 1, not 2, but actually 3 long deep balls. One was overthrown, one was underthrown, one was dropped by Terry. 2 were on the same drive, so it wasn't going to be a 5-touchdown day, but truly was a sheesh performance for someone who, again, has had a career year. But man, Dwayne, could you imagine if he could have hauled those ones in 2?
Yeah, I mean, he had a 75% share of the team's air yards overall. So with Zach Ertz out, it really did just become, the Terry McLaurin show, also without Noah Brown. So when you look at the Commanders' offense, we've got Jaden Daniels, we've got whatever you can do in the run game, and it's pretty much Terry McLaurin. But to your point, I mean, the guy's having a career year. He's got a 24% target share on the season, 43% of the team's air yards. He's sitting at a 7.7 utilization score for the season, which is typically around a mid-range wide receiver 2, but obviously carries wide receiver 1 upside in any given week, which is what we saw last weekend.
Otherwise, guys, rounding out the top of the list, we can see guys like Kayshon Boutte, Quentin Johnston, Elijah Moore, Xavier Worthy, Keenan Allen, George Kittle, and yes, Maserati, Marvin Harrison as well. So last point would be a quick shout out to, friend of the program, Jacob Gibbs. Really great follow over on Twitter at JAGibbs_23. But Worthy now on the season, Dwayne, has received 10 targets of 30-plus air yards from Patrick Mahomes. They have only connected on 1 such target. So whether it's been Worthy running out of bounds, well, there's been Mahomes, honestly missing a couple of those throws himself, just haven't quite seen that prolific downfield execution that we were hoping for from the duo. Let's move on to the down at the 1-yard line leaderboard. I went through all the play-by-play box scores to basically figure out players who got down to the 1-yard line and then did not score a touchdown on the same drive. And of course, the leader on this one, not the thing you want to be leading, but Jonathan Taylor, man, dropping that football at the 1-yard line, and I'm sure Dwayne losing people a ton of their fantasy matchups. So yeah, guys, please hold on to the football and just hand it to the ref. Why is this so hard?
Yeah, for sure. The guy I would want to talk about on this list is the number 2 guy here, Brian Robinson Jr. He did not come through last weekend in the fantasy box score with only 11.7 points, coming off of a 17.9 performance before the bye in week 13. But really, this is the healthiest that he's looked, especially from a role standpoint. He had 73% of the snaps in this game, Ian, 59% of the rushing attempts. And remember, Jaden Daniels is getting some of those, and a 50% route participation. So a 7.9 utilization score, that can be a high-end running back too. So I do think with Brian Robinson Jr., we've got 2 more games without Austin Eckler. He's missed 2, but then they got the bye in there. So it looks like 3 weeks, but he's really only missed 2 games. So 2 more games here with Brian Robinson. Tough matchup against the Eagles, but it is a Commanders offense that we like overall. Not as strong as it was early in the season, but still a plus offense. So Brian Robinson Jr. is due for a big game. We'll see if he can, Chuba Hubbard came through against the Eagles somehow. Yeah. So Brian Robinson Jr., not the worst guy to have in your lineup, even though the matchup isn't ideal this weekend.
Going to be, again, more of a mid-tier RB2 because of that tough matchup. But week 17 against the Falcons, Dwayne, that's really when we can get back to Robinson as a potential legit RB1. So otherwise, DeAndre Swift was stopped again at the 1 twice on the same drive. And then no thanks to Doug Kramer, could not get that touchdown. Also, Kenneth Gainwell, Ty Johnson, yes, Justin Jefferson, our one true sun god, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Davante Adams, Curtis Samuel, Greg Dortch, Trey McBride. Yes, they are trying to get my man a touchdown, but it's just not working. Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love also, again, getting all the way to the 1-yard line without being able to punch the ball in. So also we'll say Jonathan Taylor, not the only one to pull off that, just horrific, I guess we could say, Deshaun Jackson-esque move from way back when. Jordan Battle, the Bengals safety, also pulled off the same thing. So not ideal, Dwayne, but what is during any given week of football? And that's why, again, we go to the Sheesh Report to try to find all the things that maybe you missed if you weren't watching as closely as, maybe you could have. So yeah, guys, check it out for free over at fantasylife.com. But before we move on to some utilization goodness, did want to give a shout out to, again, our presenting sponsor, Mike's Hard Lemonade, because the fantasy football playoffs are here. And while that may be cause for celebration for some, that also means there are some more hard days to come. And accordingly, guys, Mike's Hard Lemonade wants to remind you that hard days deserve a hard lemonade. It doesn't matter if you earned a first-round bye, had to fight and claw for that final spot, or if your season was over the second you made pick 101. You worked hard all season, so quench your hard-earned thirst with a Mike's Hard Lemonade. Utilization Report season presented by DraftKings. Dwayne, critics love it. Award people love it. I love it. We all love it. It's utilization
award
season,
people,
man. Yeah, kind of. Just critics. Anyway, talking about the Bills offense, a group that is scoring ridiculous points lately. I mean, they have scored at least 30 points in 8 straight games. The next longest active streak in the NFL is the Packers with 4. We've actually only seen the 2010-11 Patriots with 13, 2012 and 13 Broncos, and 2006 and 2007 Patriots beat this current streak since 2000, Dwayne. So all these points, all these yards going on, and we love it for Josh Allen and James Cook. And yet we somehow can't find an overly reliable pass catcher in fantasy. What gives?
Yeah, well, we had the return of Keon Coleman as well as Dalton Kincaid to the offense. And while that's a good thing for the Bills, it just further distributed things as far as the playing time. And we don't have anyone, no pass catcher this last weekend, Ian, on the entire team got to a 70% route participation. Now, if you're in these shootout games where you're throwing for 342, 362 yards, and we know Josh Allen is capable of keeping that up, it doesn't matter that much, right? You're overcoming it with how many passing yards are there to go around. But then you get into these matchups upcoming where maybe it won't be as much of a shootout. And that's where I think you have to get a little bit more concerned. So when you look at Khalil Shakir, this is a guy that honestly, when I went into the utilization data this weekend, I was hoping, Ian, that we could give him another upgrade. He had a 4-game streak going with an 80% route participation or better with Keon Coleman returning to the lineup. That dropped to 64%. So when you look at him on the season, even going back and looking at the games, or he didn't get to an 80% route participation. He hasn't been terrible. He's still scoring you 13.9 fantasy points in those games. So if you're playing in a league that starts 3 wide receivers, you got 12 teams, you're still starting Khalil Shakir. Where he becomes a little bit of a closer call moving forward, especially this weekend, is if you're in one of these leagues where you only play 2 wide receivers, right? Maybe you got one flex spot and you're having to decide between him and another running back. I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as it had been. The offense is good enough. I didn't give him a downgrade, but I couldn't give him the upgrade that I was hoping for. In fact, he's overperforming his utilization score, right? His utilization score sits at a 5.3. If you look at the average points for wide receivers in that range over the last 4 years, 12.4 points. I just told you he's scoring 13.9. So he's already outperforming. But again, that comes back to you got Josh Allen, you got an offense that we like. So we're probably fine with that. But the big thing here is only 8% of his comps finished as a wide receiver 2 or better. Actually, 0% were in the wide receiver 1 conversation. So the ceiling, it's like he's already playing at it, really. I just don't know that there's much more there. And there's probably honestly more room for him to regress the other way just because this playing time is it's just a real hassle, man. We want guys, as normal wide receiver 1s, get 90 to 95% route participation. Khalil Shakir's out here having to do it with 80%. Had been 80%, which we took. We were happy to take that. Now we're back down in the 60s.
Certainly making the most of his opportunities. I mean, only Jamar Chase has actually forced more missed tackles as a receiver than Khalil Shakir this season. And yeah, wide receiver 31 in PPR points per game, ahead of guys like Tyreek Hill, George Pickens, DK Metcalf, and Jaden Reed, among others. But only so much you can do, Dwain, in such a crowded passing game, which is why Amari Cooper, unfortunately, needs to be downgraded.
Yeah, man. Amari took a big hit here. He led the Bills in target share just the week before at 38%, even though he didn't have a full-time role, 63% route participation that week before. It was a step in the right direction. We thought, well, maybe, okay, it's just really been the injury, getting the timing down, getting to where Josh Allen feels comfortable with him. Nope, with Keon Coleman back, down to a 42% route participation. Early in the game, it did look like they were going to try to go to Amari. In that first quarter, he was out there for 73% of the routes. But as the game went on, it just got lower and lower and lower. And it started in the second quarter. It wasn't like it was a garbage time thing where Amari just got benched. They just moved away from him during the course of the game. Now, he's got a 24% targets per route run since joining the Bills. That's still a really strong mark. So that points to potential if somehow things ever went his way and he was to be in the offense, for more of a full-time role. But right now, man, you just cannot have Amari Cooper anywhere near your fantasy lineup. He's not even a must roster anymore at this point. I mean, if you've got critical decisions you're having to make, I prefer to keep him just because we like the offense. And you know how things can change so fast with injuries, Ian. And all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that I think you and I both agree, if Amari Cooper was a full-time player in this offense, he'd be a wide receiver 2 and giving you wide receiver 1 weeks. But that's just not the case right now. The Bills feel really committed at this point, Ian, to this rotation. They got rid of Stephon Diggs. They said they were going away from just having this one guy. And man, they have really held to it. We have got a true peanut butter spread evenly across the bread. Like everyone's getting their playing time. So it's really tough right now in Buffalo, especially for Amari Cooper.
6 games now with the Bills, wide receiver 52 or worse in 4 of those. So, hey, maybe it is the Bills. He catches a touchdown, one of a few targets, but as we saw last week, can't even necessarily guarantee a few targets out there. Tough times indeed. But want to talk about, Dwain, the other returning member of the Bills last week, not just Keon Coleman, but Dalton Kincaid, someone whose box score would have looked quite a bit better if that chest pass touchdown wouldn't have been nullified on a holding penalty. So Kincaid really has had the nice underlying utilization metrics all season long. Maybe he's just waiting for, the biggest, best weeks of the year, Dwain, to finally come through.
Everything except the playing time. Again, things are so spread out. Now, I will chalk this one up to it's his first game back. He had a 3-game absence when you're returning from injury. We see this sometimes. They just don't give these guys a full-time role. It was Dawson Knox leading the way with a 67% route participation versus Dalton Kincaid at 58% this last weekend. But Kincaid did keep one really important trend going, and that was leading the team, in targets at the tight end position. He came out here and he had a 33% targets per route run. So what happens? Even though your route participation is lower, when you're getting that many targets per route, then your target share is still okay. And you saw that this last weekend. A 23% target share for a tight end is really good. And we can now go back to the last 6 contests. He's had a 21% targets per route run or higher. He was getting really hot right before the injury. So he's just a guy that, Ian, if suddenly he did get into that full-time role, I think he would still have the potential to suddenly surprise at the end of the year and where people are like, oh, I see why we drafted Dalton Kincaid as a top 6 tight end. I think that the underlying talent still may be there, just not getting that full-time role. So we'll have to wait and see what do the Bills decide to do. But even in this part-time role right now, at tight end, it's a little bit easier because he is getting the targets. So that makes him a low-end tight end 1 for me. You can see here on the screen, tight end 7 to 9 finishes for players with his utilization score 11% of the time, 10 to 12, 22% of the time. So 33% of the time you've had a guy right there in that low-end tight end 1 conversation, and then 22% or 28% of the guys were right there just below that. So I think that makes him a borderline tight end 1, but if his playing time did increase, and he's the one I'm the most optimistic about because he was coming off the injury. We were seeing a few games before the injury where he was getting higher in route participation. If that came to fruition, like he could be a guy that could still be a high-end tight end 1, maybe by we don't have very much time left, Ian, this weekend or next weekend. So we'll see where it goes. I know he's a tougher decision this weekend in your fantasy lineup if you've got other options.
And it really does come down to this matchup, having a mix of good and bad. On the one hand, Dwayne, we've seen this Patriots defense really get, shellacked over the better part of the last month or so. Tua and Stafford both threw for 4+ touchdowns. Even Kyler, despite not finding the end zone, was pretty efficient on his dropbacks. But man, it's in Buffalo. And as we know, these December Buffalo games can get a bit snowy. Those look like there will be some precipitation and just 17 degrees on Sunday for a Bills team. That's 14-point favorites, Dwayne. So made the point last week, talking about the Ravens and Giants. And it's like, well, if game script gets out of hand, that's going to be because they scored a lot of points to get there. So not saying we can't, again, be starting these guys by, any stretch, but at the same time, really is going to be potentially a smaller pie than usual. That, again, continues to be divided a bit more evenly than fantasy managers would prefer. So trouble in paradise, AKA Buffalo indeed. But Dwayne, still got some more situations to break down right after a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. Grab your favorite team's jersey and some snacks and head to the couch for another Sunday of action-packed football. And you can get even closer to the action with my partners at DraftKings, because right now, all new DraftKings customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins after betting just $5. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use the promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Dwayne, time for some upgrade season here. Going to be talking a couple running backs to start. And first of all, Chase Brown, someone who, has pretty much been a mid-tier RB1 for us ever since Zach Moss got put on IR with the neck injury. And accordingly, he is now rising up to high-end RB1 status. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, he's just one of these true rarities that we get every once in a while in fantasy football. A guy on an absolute, workhorse load every down back, but also on an offense that we like with the Bengals, one that scores a lot of points. So sometimes you get one or the other. Rarely do you get both things, and you have them with Chase Brown. If you look at him, Ian, since we lost Zach Moss from the lineup, he has a 9.6 utilization score. That is the highest in the NFL over that stretch for a running back. So no running back really more dependable right now than Chase Brown. You could even argue Saquon Barkley. Does Saquon Barkley give you a better ceiling? Yeah, he does. We've seen that. But right now with Chase Brown, he never comes off the field. Khalil Herbert has not been able to make any sort of dent in his playing time. In fact, this last weekend, the guy had a 92% snap share in a game like the Bengals. Their playoff chances are over. Right? Yet they're still out here just feeding this guy. So they want, for whatever reason, they're wanting to get him all the touches. Maybe it's just Khalil Herbert isn't as good as anybody thought, or it's just because Chase Brown really is playing good football, but he doesn't leave the field on passing downs. He's taken over the 2-minute offense. He gets all the carries inside the 5-yard line. So just so many things to like. If you look at him now, Ian, 5 of his last 6 starts, he's had a utilization score of 9 or higher. He's pretty much a lock for 20 fantasy points, regardless of what the matchup is. In bad matchups, this guy's going to be right around 20 fantasy points. When he goes off, and he still hasn't given us the monster game yet. Like Chase Brown is due for like a 30-40 pointer. So this weekend, a little bit of a tougher matchup, but it just doesn't matter, guys. Like, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the top 3 running backs, no matter who he's playing, because this workload is so enormous and the Bengals are a high scoring offense.
He's game script proof, man. It can be the running with them getting up, or it could be the receiving. He mentioned it. He had a random 5-yard touchdown with like 2 minutes left in the blowout last week. And the receiving production has been there really again ever since he was put in this full featured role in week 9. Only Davante Adams actually has more PPR points from just receiving than Chase Brown among all running backs. And honestly, not even close. Like, we're talking 91 for Adams, 75 for Chase Brown, and Alvin Kamara, all the way down there at 58 as the next closest RB. So 6 starts and 6 top 9 finishes for Chase Brown. The interesting thing, though, Dwain, is, let's face it, man, we were also alive here during the first 8 weeks of the season. And while Chase Brown was better than Zach Moss, he really wasn't getting anything close to this role. And he was more or less just a flex play. I mean, not to completely, look ahead to 2025 just yet. But man, if we had to start the season over again with Chase Brown and Zach Moss, it'd be tough to immediately put Chase Brown, up into this RB1 echelon, because let's face it, really has come more so as this handcuff, boom than anything.
Well, you're definitely taking Chase Brown over Zach Moss. But the other thing is, if you remember, the positive for him is even before the injury to Zach Moss, he was already taking over. We were talking about him multiple times on the show. So that's one that we might go back and look at. But I know we talked about him at least twice, about his role continuing to expand and Zach Moss's continuing to decrease. Now, Zach Moss was hanging onto those passing downs, but really Chase Brown had taken over the leading. He was the lead rusher on the team for about a 3 to 4 week stretch before Zach Moss got injured. So I think that the changeover was already happening. To your point, if they had Zach Moss, do I think that Chase Brown would be getting 92% snap shares? No, I don't. But I think he still might be a 65% guy. So going into next year, I agree, a little bit of concern, something I'm sure we'll talk about a lot during the offseason. I think he's clearly the top guy, but obviously we wouldn't expect him to get... Look, guys, no running back gets this sort of workload. It takes a lot of things happening. Again, that's why I'm saying this is a true rarity. To be at a 90% snap share and be on an offense like this, like, honestly, we should go back and look. How many times has this even happened in the last 5 years? There's a lot of luck at play when we talk about fantasy. So that's definitely playing a role here.
Great 0 RB pick either way. And again, I do remember part of the early conversation surrounding Chase Brown was looking at his workload at Illinois and seeing that, no, this isn't some scat back. This is a player, if the right opportunity presents itself, can handle a 3-down workhorse role. And boy, has he done just that. Another running back making the most out of his new and improved workload, Dwain. Rico Dowdle just took a couple months for the Cowboys to realize, hey, this guy's our best running back.
Ian, sometimes I feel bad, about my fantasy calls. I know you do sometimes as well. We give people advice. We get a lot of questions. And, sometimes I think, man, how did I not see that? How did I not know that? And then I think about NFL coaches who get to watch these players every single day in practice. How did it take this long? I'm not saying Rico Dowdle's a world beater, but he's so much better than Zeke. Like, how does it take them so long? They even gave Dalvin Cook some run. You got Deuce Vaughn out there. You got Hunter Lipke. What are we doing? So it makes me feel better to know that, look, there's just variance with these things. And the coaches, guys that know these guys intimately, they still make mistakes as well, because this should have been Rico Dowdle's backfield from day one. We can very clearly see that. I think the Cowboys coaches would tell you that now. They would say, looking back, we wish we would have just given the ball to Rico more earlier in the season because he has been productive. But it doesn't matter now, because all we care about is where we are and where we're heading, which is hopefully fantasy championships for you guys. And if you have Rico Dowdle, you should feel pretty good about it. Over the last 3 games, I mean, he's kind of encroaching on that Chase Brown territory now, Ian. Not as good of an offense, but the workload's definitely there. He's got 73% of the snaps over that stretch, 68% of the rushing attempts, a 63% route participation. Now, that's the big one. Over these last couple of games, we've seen Rico Dowdle take over the 2-minute offense from Hunter Lipke, so it's not just some sort of random number. He's actually staying on the field towards the end of the half, or if they're in a catch-up mode, they want to run hurry-up offense. All that stuff really falls under the 2-minute offense. Rico Dowdle now getting those snaps over Hunter Lipke. So really the only time he's leaving the field is on like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. When running backs aren't getting targets anyway, and you're just wanting someone back there to block, they're letting Lipke or Zeke do that, right? And so Rico Dowdle, he's getting everything else. Carries inside the 5-yard line. He's getting those. Zeke's not stealing those anymore. So, yeah, you're feeling really good about Rico Dowdle. And if you look at the utilization score based on his roll over the last 3 games, Ian, here are his comps. 8% of them have finished as a top 6 running back. The next 30 or 50%. Wow, I thought 30. 50%. The next 50% of these guys running back 7 to running back 12. So almost 60% of the time, if you've got a role like his, you're finishing as a running back 1. So that's really all you guys need to know. So I've moved him to borderline running back 1 territory. We've got a lot of really good running backs this year, guys. There would be many years right now where I think we'd be looking at Rico Dowdle and like ranking him as running back 7. But because it's such a rich position this year, going to be more of a borderline running back 1 this weekend. But the bottom line is he should be in most lineups. So you got to be feeling great about Mr. Dowdle.
Certainly, been benefiting from the schedule a little bit. Giants, Bengals, Panthers, pretty nice run. Now got to go face Vita Vea and a Bucs defense that hasn't allowed an 100-yard game just period in 5 straight. But as Dwain mentioned, the guy's barely leaving the field. It makes sense if the Cowboys can't run if he makes up for it in the pass game. And maybe he can't run anyway, guys. Only Saquon freaking Barkley has more rushing yards than Rico Dowdle since week 9. Can't believe that's a real thing that, is alive and well in our society right now. So let's close things out, Dwain, with another upgrade. This time, though, for a wide receiver, Davante Adams, who's since joined the Jets in week 7. Yes, thanks in large part to his massive week 14. Now the wide receiver 8 in PPR points per game. And accordingly, you like him now settling in as a legit borderline wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that's going to turn 32 this month. And I guess he just thought 32 means I should try to have a 32% target share. I mean, this guy just keeps on keeping on, Ian. He plays with another really good young player and Garrett Wilson. So it's not like there's not competition for targets here, but he just continues to come through. If we look at him since he's joined the Jets, the guy has an 8.7 utilization score. That is astronomical. 18 fantasy points per game. Obviously, over these last few weeks, he's been blowing up for you in fantasy lineups. So if you've had Davante Adams, you've been feeling pretty good about it. In fact, he probably single-handedly has been helping advance you into the next week of your playoffs because he's been performing so well. But just looking at him right now, Ian, over the last 4 games, if you go over to the utilization suite of tools, you can look at season stats. We have now added a slider there where you guys can make it whatever range of weeks you want. I often focus on the last 4 weeks because that's where the utilization score really picks up most of its predictive power. If you look at it, he's second to only Jamar Chase in utilization score over the last 4 games with a 9.4. So yeah, Davante Adams absolutely balling. And if we just use his utilization score since joining the Jets, and that's including week 1 when he hadn't even hardly acclimated, and that was by far his lowest target share week, but we've got that included there. It would tell you that he is a borderline wide receiver 1, and so we've got to start ranking him higher. I think we've been a little bit too low on it. We've had him like in the mid-range wide receiver 2 conversation, over the last few weeks, but man, he's right there knocking on the door. I mean, you could, if you wanted to argue that we should be ranking him as a wide receiver 1, like I couldn't argue with you back. The only negative, right, is we just don't know which Aaron Rodgers is going to show up each week at this point. The last 2 weeks, it's been a pretty good Aaron Rodgers. The weeks before, not so much. So it really does come down to how Rodgers is performing. But man, Adams, he's getting his targets.
Some of those throws Rodgers made last week, Dwain, vintage. The sideline shot to Adams, the one down the seam was one of the best throws of the week. But we realize hasn't exactly been a consistent occurrence, throughout all season long. But maybe, just maybe here, Dwain, week 16 against a Rams defense that we've seen give up some absolutely monster games to opposing wide receivers. Davante and Rodgers continue to party like, it's 2018 again or something like that out here. So those were the utilization report upgrades. But now, guys, time for some waiver wire madness. Now, Dwain, not every running back turns into Chase Brown when the starter goes down, but that doesn't mean they can't still help us out a bit here in Fantasyland. So I want to go through again some of the bigger injury ramifications, starting off with in a situation that unfortunately we have seen quite a bit over the last 2 years. Browns RB Jerome Ford now being RB1 with Nick Chubb again out for the season with a broken foot. Unfortunately, though, Dwain, not just going to be Jerome Ford out there, also likely going to see plenty of Pierre Strong Jr. and maybe Deontay Foreman as well.
Yeah, so I will say with Ford, we've got a decent sample of what it looked like with him in this backfield, with the other backs besides Nick Chubb healthy for the first 5 games. And so if we go back and we look at that, the utilization score actually was pretty strong, Ian, a 7.4 utilization score, which would tell you he should have been more of like a mid-range running back too, but he underperformed that. Now, obviously, we're going back to the Deshaun Watson version of this offense. So it was probably more to do with the anemic offense than his role. 11.9 fantasy points is what he averaged. We saw this last weekend come in and take over for Nick Chubb, puts up 18.4 fantasy points. Obviously, a lot of that was on one big play. But to your points, I do think we're going to see some Deonta Foreman. I do think we're going to see some Pierre Strong Jr. But after really digging into this, I do think there is a little bit of a chance that they do just ride Jerome Ford, or even if they just give him the role that he had earlier in the year. If Jameis Winston is the starter, he might be okay in that role. He might really be a mid-range running back too that can help you. But if it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, honestly, I feel like we're kind of back to square one. That's going to feel a lot like Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, until he proves otherwise. You know, we're talking about a guy that's barely completed 50% of his passes for his career, has yet to throw for 200 yards in a game. So it's going to be a struggle for the offense overall. So we really need to see where we land with Winston. So for now, I'm going to say he's a borderline running back 2 because there's just some unknown variables here, but I'm a little more optimistic on him than where I was Sunday night when we first talked about him after going back and looking at that 5-game stretch to start the year.
Look, it's the Browns offense. We've seen some lows from Jameis. All right, like you're already in the dumpster. At least Jameis can get you out, you know, sometimes.
At least fans want to come to maybe the game.
Exactly.
Fans might want to come to the game with Jameis, yeah.
Again, guys, you can say Watson's right there too. He is right there too, okay? Dorian Thompson-Robinson is one of very few quarterbacks that you can make a compelling statistical argument has been worse than Deshaun Watson over these last 2 years. 2.9 yards per attempt this season, Dwayne. He's had 3 starts, and the Browns have scored 13, 12, and 3 points in those games. His interception rate, yes, it's a smaller sample, is more than twice as bad as Jameis this year. Do you have any idea how hard that is to actually do? So I pulled my headphones out. I am that angry about this going on, Dwayne. But yeah, Jerome Ford, RB36 right now. PPR points, weeks 1 through 6. That was with Watson, maybe with Jameis again, and a potential shootout against the Bengals this week can get going. So did want to talk about another running back, though. Kendre Miller for the Saints, who, yes, Dwayne, small sample, but has been looking good and might have more opportunities than ever to look good with Alvin Kamara, again, dealing with a groin injury. That doesn't sound too good.
Yeah, so this team doesn't want to give Jamal Williams touches. That's the big thing here. We've seen this for multiple games this year, even in games where we didn't have Kendre Miller available. They have not wanted to give Jamal Williams touches. So not quite sure what's going on there, but we will take it if you're a Kendre Miller manager, or if you want to go pick him up off the wire. Available 89% of leagues, but 88% of the snaps after Kamara left the game, 100% of the rushing attempts, 81% route participation, and he had an 8% target share. So I do think that we have to lean into Kendre Miller being the workhorse if Kamara is out. No Taysom Hill. Again, Jamal Williams had multiple chances to get touches this year. They haven't given it to him. Tiny sample, but I feel like they want to see what this kid has. So I would say that he would be a guy that would be a borderline running back too. The big concern here, Ian, who's going to play quarterback for the Saints? How many points can they score? This is not a high-end offense at all. They're going to be major underdogs this weekend. The next weekend, you get the Raiders, though. So maybe that's the silver lining for you if you get Kendre Miller if Kamara misses multiple games.
You mentioned the small sample, but man, he's done well with it, man. Second best missed tackles forced per carry rate behind only Kenneth Walker. Also 7th in yards after contact per carry. We'll see if he can keep those going again with a tougher matchup this week against the Packers. Let's talk some wide receivers, though, specifically Bucs wide receiver Jalen McMillan, who, yeah, Dwayne is benefiting from his surroundings, but man, look at these surroundings. 4th-ranked scoring offense, Baker's top 4 in passing yards and passing touchdowns, and now facing a Cowboys defense that will not have Trayvon Diggs.
Yeah, look, you got a rookie player. We know wide receivers often come on at the end of the year, a 3rd-round pick, a guy that had a lot of camp buzz, picked up an injury, wasn't able to keep things going, and, you get buried. When you got a guy like Chris Godwin in front of you, Ian, you're not going to get a ton of playing time, but now healthy, and over the last 2 games has a 7.5 utilization score, 20.2 fantasy points per game. You've pointed out some of that has kind of been fugazi-ish, some busted coverages, some different things going on for Jalen McMillan. But again, to your point, Name me 5 offenses that you'd rather be a part of right now down the stretch than the Bucs. I think it would be really hard. You might be able to get there, but they're definitely in that top 6-7 range. Baker Mayfield playing the best football of his career, and no matter what, Baker is gonna fling it. So I think you just have to look at a guy like McMillan and say, you know what? You got to push your chips in on it. If you are hurting at wide receiver, you just want some upside on your roster. I get it, guys. Only 2 weeks left, but don't let someone else in your league that really needs a wide receiver go get McMillan. He could surprise us and keep this going for the next 2 games. So if you look at him, Ian, I'm thinking he upgrades to boom bust wide receiver 4 status. So you're really not using him unless you're playing in a league that starts 3 wide receivers and probably 2 flexes. At this point, if you're in the playoffs, you probably have a better option. But again, you want that bench depth. What if something happens to one of your other guys? What if Mike Evans, knock on wood, we don't want this. Mike Evans goes down. He's suddenly the top option in the offense. There's just a lot of things about Jalen McMillan that means he should be on your fantasy roster.
Another ascending wide receiver who, again, you're probably not trying to jam into your lineup, but can provide some depth, or at a minimum, you take him away from someone who actually does need him. Jalen Coker, Dwain, now definitely looking at a full-time role with Xavier Legette out for at least week 16.
Yeah, and not as bullish on this one because it's not attached to the Bucs offense, but Jalen Coker really doing similar things to what we just talked about with McMillan. This is an undrafted player out of Holy Cross, Ian, and in the couple of games where we've actually seen him get to an 80% route participation, he has been usable in fantasy football, averaging 14.8 fantasy points. Again, very small sample, but with Xavier Legette battling the injury, they took playing time away from David Moore. It really could just be the Jalen Coker and Adam Thielen show down the stretch. So if you are playing in one of those deeper leagues and you're really hurting at wide receiver, Jalen Coker is a guy that's available in most leagues.
Not a layup matchup, though. I will say shout out to the Cardinals. Only trail the Eagles in terms of EPA per dropback since week 9. Let's talk about tight ends, though, Dwayne. We do have Brenton Strange now being the tight end 1 in Jacksonville with Evan Ingram done for the season. And don't look now, man. He's got 4 top 9 finishes in his 5 spot starts this season.
Yeah, man. I mean, a 28% target share basically just taken right over for Evan Ingram. And the thing is, this is a second-round pick from 2023. So he does have some draft capital, came from Penn State, I believe, if I'm remembering back correctly. Ian, 11 targets this weekend, led the team in utilization score at a 9.3, gave you 18.3 fantasy points. My son Camden had him in the lineup along with the kicker Reichert from Minnesota. Got the job done. Got the victory. Big shout out to Brenton Strange. Look, this guy's immediately in the low end tight end 1 conversation, and we might be thinking about him as a mid-range tight end 1. So if you've just been kind of having to muddle around with some of these other guys, let me ask you, Ian, Brenton Strange, Tucker Kraft.
Oh, Brenton Strange, I guess.
Brenton Strange. Yep. Yeah. Like all those guys that are down there that are boom bust up and down. I'd rather have a guy like this that I think might be stepping in at probably 7 to 10 targets per game.
Just love how proud you get talking about Camden's fantasy team over the years. Go get that W, Camden. But Dwayne, let's close things out. Wide receiver, Hollywood Brown might be back.
Yeah. Now this one's tough, Ian, because we don't know what role he'll be in. So how are you going to get him in your lineup this weekend? We also have Patrick Mahomes dealing with a high ankle sprain. So a lot of unknowns here. It would probably be a week before you would feel comfortable. But what if this weekend Patrick Mahomes looked fine, and we look at them, we're on the Sunday night recap, and we're like, whoa, Hollywood Brown, 85% route participation. If that somehow happened, the next week you're going to be thinking, I'm probably starting Hollywood Brown. So I know it's a little bit tricky, but a guy that you can stash at the end of your bench.
Man, back reunited with DeAndre Hopkins. I just kind of put that together for the first time this morning.
Oh, wow. Yeah, me too.
Show. Funny enough. So appreciate you guys tuning in as always. We'll be back tomorrow. Myself, Dwayne, Chris Allen, breaking down the biggest questions ahead of week 16. But until then, enjoy the day. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.